Life can sure get hard, lonely, painful. It can feel so dark, so much unknown. The Jesus story affirms that hard, dark times are part of life. And right now, it is hard, so hard in our world. Good Friday shows us how the dark, the pain, fear, and suffering of our lives and our world is held in the suffering and the embrace of Jesus on the cross. And after Jesus' resurrection, the first Jesus followers and the writers of the New Testament, they say again and again how God is anakephaleosisthaying, that God is retelling, renewing, restoring. Not just some of it, but all of it. All things, they say, will be retold, which doesn't take away our grief now. It doesn't make light of our pain or how hard it is to face the unknown now. It will always be part of our story, yet it isn't the end of the story. But what do we do while we're in hard times? What do we do when it's hard right now? Well, this season at Salt House, we're exploring these questions together. We think there's something in the stories of what happened right after Jesus' resurrection. We think it's in having honest conversations about grief and hope. We think it's in becoming people on the lookout for how everything is being retold, even now. This is what we'll do. So open your eyes and heart now. Breathe deeply now in this hard time as we pause to grow and learn to see and speak of the signs of life in and around us, even now. Hello again, friends. I'm here at Salt House, and it is so good to be here. I've so enjoyed worship the last 4 weeks. We've done pre-recorded services, and I've really enjoyed that. It meant I could be home on Sunday morning with my kids still in their jammies, and we were watching together and engaging together like in the same moment as you, and I've really, really enjoyed that. But it also feels really good, too, to be here on a Sunday morning at Salt House. And also strange to not be here with you. That's strange too. So know that I miss you and the goodness that happens when we're together tremendously. Though I do know that God is in this moment, in here with us in this way, with us always. And for that, I am so grateful. So a reminder to go to that bulletin page and fill out your prayers as you have a chance to do that before we get to that prayer time in just a little bit. But we are today in our second Sunday in this time of our series, Signs of Life. Man, how about that series video? Yes? Good stuff. So last Sunday in our series, we took time with our core practice of being people who listen and pay attention to our lives, our world, and to God through the practice of Lectio Divina. We practice being people who listen in community so that we can be people who practice listening everywhere, right? And another way in which we listen is in how we listen to and tell our stories. So sharing our stories is part of another one of our 7 core practices that have organically emerged here at Salt House, our practice that stories matter. Stories matter, which means we try to show up here in community at Salt House, owning the lives and the stories that we're living because our stories matter. In all their messiness and surprise and beauty, our stories matter. We try to be curious about the stories of those we bump into when we're here on Sundays, but also beyond these walls and also now online as we bump into each other, because the stories of others matter. This is a core practice for us at Salt House because the Jesus story shows us that stories matter. And as we share and hear our stories, we see that there is overlap and resonance and differences and echoes of the Jesus story in these lives that we are living here and now. And so our sermon time today puts this all into practice through one of the things that we do regularly, which is to hear the story of someone from our Salt House community. We call these Sundays our Salt House Stories Sundays, and today we hear Ann Anderson's Salt House story. So you might know Anne because she may have been someone who greeted you when you came to Salt House for the first time because she's part of our welcome team. You might know Anne because you have been in a time of need and she reached out to you on behalf of our care team. You might know Anne if you have been around this neighborhood for a while because Anne has lived here with her husband Jim and raised their kids here for decades. And she seems to know everybody, which is just so great. And if you don't know her yet, you're in for a real treat. Anne also currently serves on our church council, and she's slated to be our next president of the church council beginning in July. So this is a great chance for us to get to know one of our key leaders for this next year. So Anne is so much more than all of this, some of which she will share with you. And as with all Salt House stories, we won't get to know everything about Anne, but one thread of her story. She has chosen to share parts of her journey that really speak deeply into this time we are facing in our world right now. So our posture now is one of listening with openness to Anne's story, to hear our own story in her story, to hear God's story in her story, and so that we can be nudged in some way further into the Jesus story. So as we welcome Anne to the Salt House microphone, let's take a moment to pray. God, we do take a moment again just to be present. We let our bodies become aware of the journey they have been on, the narratives we have lived through and are living now, with highs and lows, with elation and heartbreak. And we open ourselves to another story, to Anne's story. Infuse Anne's story now with your deep wisdom and tenderness, and be with us, hold us in our receiving of her story. Amen.
My story begins with growing up in Longview, Washington, a small town as the youngest child in my family. Family, friends, and church that I walked to with my best friend on Sunday mornings were the most important things. There's a picture of me and my siblings. I'm the shortest in the front. I must have been about 10 then, I think. There's incredible similarity to my life now, even walking to church at Salt House on Sundays, sometimes with my best friend, my husband, Jim. This other picture is now my family, our 4 kids, and my daughter, Molly's fiance. This was on my 60th birthday, so I'm a little bit older than my previous picture. The added dimension to my life now is my journey as a mom and as a nurse. I work as the nurse coordinator with the Palliative Care Program at Seattle Children's. If you don't know what palliative care is, it's a way of providing an extra layer of support to those experiencing serious illness. We hold the uncertainty that families are facing and focus on making sure their child's symptoms are managed and that they have the best quality of life that they can. I coordinate our outpatient program and also work closely with hospices around our region to educate and support them in caring for kids at the end of their lives. Usually when I tell people what I do for a job, they immediately say, "That sounds horrible and it must be so sad." It does have its moments. It is sad at times. It is hard. But what I'm witness to is such a gift. First of all, I work with an amazing team that focuses on supporting families through their worst times. It's hard to explain how we were able to meet a family where they are and hear their story. We learn about their child, learn about what brings their child joy, and what is most important to them as a family. We walk alongside them and help guide them through difficult decisions that they make. Based on what they have shared with us, their hopes and worries and values, we help them get to those difficult decisions. The joy and beauty I've experienced over my 15 years as a pediatric hospice and palliative care nurse is really so hard to articulate. There's a lot of hope in the midst of the uncertainty and sadness that I experience, and I feel blessed to be with families during these times. I'll try to explain the paradox with a story about a special 10-year-old boy who arrived from another state to receive a bone marrow transplant for a very rare illness. I told his mother that I was going to talk about him today, and she was thrilled that I would talk about him and said, oh, please use his name. But there's that thing called HIPAA. So I'm going to call him Alex. Alex had spent most of his life in the hospital. He came from a wonderful family, and through the support of great care and great people in his lives, he had become the most empathetic and spiritual child I think I ever have met. Every morning he would choose a picture of a child that had the same illness that he had connected with on social media, and placed it on a board at the end of his bed. One board said, "Today I fight with," and then the picture of the child. And if the child was alive, that's what it said. If it was a child that had passed away, he would put that picture up there and say, "Today I fight in memory of." Granted, it took this child having an amazing mother to produce those pictures and produce the sign, but what I witnessed in his genuine discernment of who to choose that day to honor, and the prayer that he offered them when he placed their picture up there, was such an unbelievable sight to behold. I can only describe it as deeply spiritual. He loved his life in spite of all of his challenges. He often signed his name and then wrote below it, "Love your life," because that was sort of his mantra. He was so excited to come to Washington to have his bone marrow transplant because he had a fascination with Bigfoot. He hoped to get better so he could go searching for Bigfoot in the woods. I was in his hospital room once when he received a call from someone affiliated with a TV show about Bigfoot hunters. To witness the pure joy and fascination in this little freckled-faced boy and hear him exclaim to the person on the phone, "This is the best day of my life," was just something I will never forget. Through his long hospitalization, Alex never lost faith. Whether it was for his ill grandmother or the health of other children in the hospital, he would spontaneously drop his head and begin to pray. When he was younger and sick in the hospital in his home state, he heard there were hungry children in his community, and he asked people to come visiting him to please bring boxes of cereal so that he could donate them. He collected so many boxes of cereal that they had to get carts and dollies to take things away, and that cereal drive continues today. As Alex neared the end of his life in the hospital after fighting for so long, he experienced a medical emergency, and his mother feared he was dying. When he awakened from this, really miraculously, his family felt, his mother asked him if he was scared, and he shook his head no. She asked him if he knew that he was going to be okay, and he nodded yes. She asked him how he knew that, and he mouthed to her, "God and Jesus." And then he mouthed to his mother, "I love you." That was their last conversation before he died. The legacy he left them helps them get up every day and be able to move on with their life with the unimaginable loss of their son. It's so hard for them, and they really work hard at finding meaning in that. His mother collects things for Seattle Children's. She's done drives for their hospitals in their home state, all in memory of her sweet Alex. As a nurse, I've witnessed the most beautiful moments: birth of babies, cures of cancer, but also so much loss that just does not make sense. Yet in these moments of grief and loss, I have witnessed God's presence. Not all of my patients have similar faith journeys to mine. I've had ashes put on my forehead in the chapel at Seattle Children's while a man prays, a few feet away from me on a prayer rug to Allah. I have learned to ask with curiosity about what helps a family get through hard times. Sometimes with a chuckle, they'll say, wine or coffee, but often they will share with me their faith journey. I've worked with Hindus, Muslims, Wiccans, agnostics, et cetera, and through it all, I have felt God's presence with me. As I work from home in the midst of the COVID-19 crisis, I'm grieving the loss of connection with my team and connecting in person with the families I work with. I'm sort of the mom of our palliative care team. I bake, I organize the celebrations, and I'm often the one giving parenting advice to the younger people on my team. And it's really hard to be a mom without being present, and hard to not be with my patients that I have strong relationships with. I have a patient that I have been through many ups and downs over many hospitalizations and many years who just died this week. And it was so hard to support her because I realized using a video interpreter, because the family speaks Spanish, just did not work in providing the support that they needed. And luckily, one of the doctors from my team was able to give them support during their final hours. With restrictions due to COVID-19, only one parent can be at the hospital. Families in the hospital are grieving the loss of their family-centered care, that grandparents and friends and siblings can't be there. Staff are struggling that want to have more hands-on touch with patients. They're wearing masks and shields and gowns. It really is difficult, and I think I have learned so much through this about how important that physical presence is. For a lot of us, this is our moment. The social isolation is the hardest thing we have gone through, and the uncertainty of what is ahead makes it even harder. Like my patients' families, we don't know when or if life will return to normal. When will we be able to go back to work or to school? How long will I need to homeschool my kids? Will my job look different when this is all over? Will I still have a job? Why do I feel so alone? We are sad for our kids that are missing out on prom and graduation and other year-end things. This is grief. Even if we haven't lost loved ones to COVID-19, this is grief. This time, the grief feels different than when I have experienced the loss of someone close to me, because this time everyone is experiencing it, and we can't even be together to comfort one another. Normally, when life is uncertain and hard, we have our community to surround us, but everyone is isolated. In our family, the thing we're worrying about is, will our daughter be able to get married in August? We remind ourselves that we have so much to be thankful for and we are healthy, but it still is so hard. And for many of us, this difficulty, this social isolation, this pandemic moment, isn't our first brush with loss. Many of us have faced loss and grief before. It's true for me, I know. I'm someone who's experienced much personal loss and grief over the course of my life. I lost my brother when he was 31. Jim and I lost our infant son, Philip. My father, my nephew died at 39, and other loved ones. In these moments of tremendous loss, I wondered, haven't I had enough? Haven't I filled my quota of loss? And then also, I'm such a good person and a nurse caring for others who are going through hard times. Doesn't that earn me any extra credit or exemption from more loss? One of the most painful losses of my life happened when Jim and I were a few weeks away from my due date with our second child, and his umbilical cord got twisted and he was stillborn. Philip was a beautiful baby boy that we wanted so much. Hamilton, our 3.5-year-old at the time, said it best: I didn't want my baby to die. Jim and I chose to remember him, not always with sadness, but to embrace the joy he had brought us as well. My experience helps me to empathize with families in a special way, which is a blessing and brings honor to Philip's life. What my life and work have shown me is that there is no exemption from loss. We're never done with loss. Yet in the loss I have seen, there are many gifts, and I want to name just two of them. The first profound thing I have learned about living through loss is something that I could not have understood without living through it. It is the effect of people praying. In the midst of some of my most gut-wrenching times, I have felt peace amidst the grief. Just knowing people are praying for me and grieving along with me. That has had more impact and consolation for me than I could have ever imagined. The other profound thing has been the additional ways I have known that God is with me. I see it again and again in the hospital, how God is poignantly present in times of great hurting and heartbreak and illness. This was so true in Alex's life. I have also seen it in my life in times of grief. And it's even true, and especially in these moments of anxiety and uncertainty we face now. I find myself going back to the reassurance that God is with us in this. Just last week, God spoke to me with the Lectio Divina we did with Psalm 16. The phrases that resonated with me were, "Oh God, keep me safe. You are my refuge." Those are such reassuring words, words that point to the presence of God with me, with us always. So I know there is no exemption from loss, but there is always the powerful presence of others through prayer and the presence of God in surprising ways. Have you known this to be true also? I wonder what God has been saying to you in this time. I wonder what you've heard from God. As you consider that in closing, I want to share a couple final memories, stories of my experience of God present with me in the midst of deep loss. When I was about 12, my grandmother, who had cancer, came to live with us. As she declined and went to the hospital, occasionally my mother would ask me to sit with her. One day, my grandma asked me to read her the 23rd Psalm. I took the Gideon Bible out of her bedside table and found the passage and started to read it to her. As tears streamed down my face, comprehending the meaning of the words, I remember the peace on her face, that even though she was dying, she was comforted by God's presence. And through it all, I knew I was going to be okay. I think this must have been the beginning of my path to being drawn to being with others at the end of their lives. Here's a part of the 23rd Psalm from the New Living Translation for us to hold today. The Lord is my shepherd. I have all that I need. He lets me rest in green meadows. He leads me beside peaceful streams. He renews my strength. He guides me along right paths, bringing honor to his name. Even when I walk through the darkest valley, I will not be afraid, for you are close beside me. 2 years ago, I went to visit my godfather back where I grew up in Longview. Stan had just gone on hospice, and I wanted to make sure I saw him if his time was short. Over the course of my 2-day visit, he rapidly declined, and I was able to gather his family around and care for them and guide them as his death neared. Stan had been a hospice medical director, and he was the person who nudged me onto the journey of being a hospice nurse, which really has been the most rewarding and heartbreaking work. It felt so full circle to be there at the end with him. He died early on that Sunday morning. His family and I had a beautiful time together, remembering him with stories in the middle of the night around his bed. And I snuck out early the next morning because I really felt the need to be at Salt House to grieve this loss in this space. And I really wanted to write his name on both the grief and the gratitude walls. At church that day, one of the first songs we sang was a song version of the 23rd Psalm. I felt the mixture of joy and grief with tears streaming down my face. Lord, even when we walk through the darkest valley, you are close beside us. Amen.
God is my shepherd, I won't be wanting, I won't be wanting. He makes me rest in fields of green, quiet streams. Even though I walk through the valley of death and dying, I will not fear, 'cause you are with me, you are with me. Shepherd's staff, it comforts me. You are my feast in the presence of enemies. Surely goodness will follow me, follow me in the house of God forever. My shepherd, I won't be wanting, I won't be wanting. He makes me rest in fields of green, quiet streams. Even though I walk through the valley of death and dying, I will not fear, 'cause you are with me, you are with me. Shepherd's staff, it comforts me. You are my feast in the presence of enemies. Surely goodness will follow me, follow me in the house of God forever. Of God forever, in the house of God forever.
I wanted to send you off with this blessing from a book that I use a lot in my work. It's called The Cure of Sorrow by Jan Richardson, and this is called The Blessing of Hope. So may we know the hope that is not just for someday, but for this day, here, now, in this moment that opens to us. Hope not made of wishes, but of substance. Hope made of sinew and muscle and bone. Hope that has breath and a beating heart. Hope that will not keep quiet and be polite. Hope that knows how to holler when it is called for. Hope that knows how to sing when there seems little cause. Hope that raises us from the dead, not someday, but this day, every day, again and again and again. May you go in peace to be salt and light for the world. Thanks be to God.